Malefic Roar was adjusted in patch 1.7.94 in June of 2023, along with the emblem system revamp. And I believe many players are wondering how good is Malefic Roar now and about the optimal time to add this item into their build. I previously covered the old Malefic Roar and reviewed its damage potency even in the early to mid stages of the game. But has the changes made it unviable, and is it still worth it to buy it early? Well, let's find out, shall we? The old Malefic Roar had two passives. The first is a static 35% physical penetration, and the second passive is a scaling 0.05% physical penetration for each point of enemy physical defense. As Moonton wanted to nerf the early game power of Malefic Roar, they nerfed the first passive down to 20% and buffed the second passive to 0.125% to balance things out. From this graph, you can see that the point where the new Malefic Roar catches up on penetration with the old Malefic Roar is at 200 physical defense, and becomes stronger than the older Malefic Roar beyond that point. It is quite uncommon for most lineups to feature more than one or two heroes who would even acquire more than 120 physical defense in a typical match. So it's safe to say that Malefic Roar has been nerfed. Now, let us analyze the damage potential of the new Malefic Roar as compared to other items. I will be comparing the damage of Malefic Roar against other potential items with three example heroes: Terizla, Dyroth, and Beatrix. So let's start with Terizla, who is a pretty common XP lane pick nowadays. We will compare his damage during the early, mid, and late stages of the game to see when's the optimal time to purchase Malefic Roar or whether to even buy it at all. Here is the emblem setup I'll be using on Terizla. On average, players will get their first item at around level 7, and so will use all stats at level 7. The average hero in Mobile Legends will have around 45 base physical defense at level 7, and so I'll manipulate our volunteer Laylas in this showcase to have 45 physical defense exactly. We'll be comparing three different items in this first showcase. The first is Bloodlust Axe on the left panel and Hunter Strike on the center panel. Both are common first items for Terizla players. And lastly, Malefic Roar is on the right panel. Alright, here we go. From 3 hits of Terizla's skill 2, we can see that Malefic Roar outdamages Bloodlust Axe only by a mere 5%, while Hunter Strike will outdamage it by around 7%. Considering that Malefic Roar offers only damage and no other utilities, unlike Bloodlust Axe or Hunter Strike, it's not really a consideration when the enemy does not build any defensive items in the early game. Now, what if an enemy builds Dreadnought Armor, which is a common defensive item to counter Terizla? The gap between Bloodlust Axe and Malefic Roar now widens to about a 12% difference, while it will deal about the same damage as Hunter Strike. At this point, Hunter Strike is still the better option compared to Malefic Roar, since it offers extra utilities on top of having about equal damage. It can be quite common for the opposite XP laner to build Dominance Eyes as a first item when facing Terizla, so let's also showcase the damage if the enemy builds Dominance Eyes. And so, Bloodlust Axe does roughly 18% less damage than Malefic Roar, while Hunter Strike will do about 7% less damage than Malefic Roar if the enemy has Dominance Eyes at this stage. So we can see, Malefic Roar is theoretically still pretty good in boosting your damage despite the nerf to its early game scaling. But if and only if the enemy prioritizes defensive items from the get-go. But given Terizla already does sufficient damage in the early stages, and most enemies, especially squishies that you'll mostly be targeting and who certainly are not prioritizing Dominance Eyes as their first item, I don't see a need to build Malefic Roar on Terizla in the early stages. Now, let's move on to the mid game, where on average most players complete their second item and are around level 10. Most Terizla players at this point will have Fury Hammer as their only damage item, and will build towards defensive items since Terizla has pretty dope base damage even without damage items. But for the sake of science and the chats who are going full damage, let's take a look at how we can increase that damage. So we start with no defensive items on the enemies first. Now, let's see how we do against a squishy who is smart enough to have at least Dreadnought Armor. Okay, now let's check out the damage against tanky enemies who may have Dominance Eyes plus Dreadnought Armor. As we saw, the damage from Malefic Roar can be a lot more than Bloodlust Axe if enemies start to build defenses, while it only starts to have a significant damage gap to Hunter Strike with heavy physical defenses built. In my opinion, Terizla has sufficient spell vamp with the new fighter emblem and Blood Festival that I don't see a need to have it in my build at this point. And since Malefic Roar only gaps Hunter Strike against enemies with high physical defenses, I can only suggest it when facing a very tanky lineup, since I would prefer Hunter Strike's utilities in general situations. Okay, let's take a look at the late game. I am assuming level 15 stats on the enemies and that we already have Hunter Strike built, and so we will consider Blade of Despair as a potential item to build instead of a second Hunter Strike. We can see that even if squishies are building the common defensive options such as Warrior Boots and Immortality, Malefic Roar will outdamage both Bloodlust Axe and Blade of Despair. So all in all, we can see that Malefic Roar is a great damage option for Terizla in the late stages of the game, especially against tanky lineups who build physical defenses, as it can even outdamage Blade of Despair by 23%. The next hero we'll be looking at is Dyroth, who is one of the best anti-physical defense heroes in the game because of his inbuilt 75% physical defense reduction from his enhanced skill tool. Well, let's see how effective the new Malefic Roar is on him. Here is the emblem set I'm using on him. Since I'll be using the same comparison format as Terizla, I'll just let the video play through all of the early game comparisons first. Enjoy! As we can see, you probably shouldn't build Malefic Roar on Dyroth in the early game, especially since the other items offer more utility and damage. Now, let's check out the mid game. As we can see, Malefic Roar still loses out to both Blade of Despair and Hunter Strike, even when enemies have built up their physical defenses. And so, Malefic Roar is still not a consideration for Dyroth in the mid game. Now, let's move on to the late game. Well, Malefic Roar finally outdamages the other items, but only by 3% compared to Blade of Despair when the enemy has both Dominance Eyes and Antique Cuirass built. In my opinion, I'd rather opt for Blade of Despair for Dyroth's third damage item, since it offers more damage against less tanky targets, and also has a Reaping passive to deal more damage to low health targets. Now, let's take a look at Beatrix. Since Beatrix does not do any skill damage, we'll swap out Dreadnought Armor for Steel Leg Plates, and Antique Cuirass for Blade Armor to better represent what enemies will build for defense against her. Here is the emblem set I'll be using on Beatrix. Here's the damage comparisons for the early game. Enjoy! Here, we can see that it's not worth it to go for Malefic Roar early. Even when the enemies are building some early defensive items, Malefic Roar will still do less damage than the other options available. For the mid game, we assume we already have Blade of Despair. As we saw, Malefic Roar beats Hunter Strike, while Blade of Heptasis can be competitive, or even stronger than Malefic Roar in the rare case that enemies do not build any physical defense items. For the late game, we'll assume we already have Blade of Despair and Blade of Heptasis in our build. As a third item in this build, Malefic Roar's damage surges past other common third items such as Hunter Strike and Wind of Nature for Beatrix, even when enemies are not building physical defenses. Against the common squishy build of Warrior Boots and Malefic Roar, it also far outdamages them, and against a tanky build, it demolishes the competition by a large margin. So, to come back to the question at the start of the video again, should we still buy Malefic Roar early? In short, the answer is more to a no. All in all, I find that Malefic Roar is still a staple item for most physical damage dealers, especially as we are still seeing plenty of tanks in the meta. However, because of the nerfs, we should prioritize Malefic Roar much later than before, as it requires a higher amount of physical defense before it starts outdamaging the other options. So when exactly should you build it? Unfortunately, this question can only be answered with a big "it depends." There are many factors that come into this equation, such as your hero damage scaling, the other items in your build, and the enemy's defense scaling and items. In general, I would say making it your third or fourth damage item is a pretty safe bet for damage dealers, while if you are only building 1 or 2 damage items, such as a hybrid build on fighters, you'll be better off waiting until the late game and building it as a 4th or 5th item. So, will you be changing your build after this? What do you think about the changes to Malefic Roar? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video has been helpful to you. I'll see you in the next one.